We've got a battleship.
Are you crazy? That's a museum.
Hey, Louie.
What's up, Heidi? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
And I'm good. How are you? Yeah, good. I'm fine. Thank you. And you?
I'm fine too.
Yeah.
Only bottle drink.
During your visit today. It is also extremely hot on board and we do not sell water on board. So if you need to purchase water first, it is only sold down here over here. If you have closed and sealable bottles, you can bring that up with you for hydration stations that are available. 75 minutes on and tours will be all for you to take with the price of your ticket. One of the first things you'll get to do when it's upon board. Either the main ticket will be scanned or we'll have it. Okay, what's the matter? Libby.
the quarterdeck. You want a guided tour?
I'm good, thank you.
When you're right, you need to come up with a introductory. 3 levels.
knew it, yeah, because he's the chaplain.
Okay. Just
Look at his cup.
Oh,
It
this
says
is pastor. I got a lockbox.
Okay. That's the exit, so we want to go back this way to the war room.
Yeah.
Which is that?
Yeah.
Let's see where we are.
Yeah, but we can go around because there's a couple more rooms you let's see.
I think we did.
Okay.
Where didn't we?
There's,
We went
there's,
down that way.
yeah, but there's two more down, there's a couple more down around here. Yeah, look at those bullets. So this was the executive officer.
Yeah, so he was the second in command of the captain.
The cabin's probably nice. Almost a little nicer than that. I'm just saying it's what.
Yeah, I know, Logan, you've said several things and I just put it forward. Yeah, it started at 44.
So yeah, they only used it for like what, 10 years?
10 years, and then they brought it back for another 6 years. So it's the wartime budget. After World War II, the spending incredible because they're fighting basically 2 wars at once in Europe and in Pacific. And before the war started, they already went over so many ships. like FDR knew that the war was coming, so he was preparing. It's something that I think both sides can agree on. Although, but I think the Republicans were a lot more like, we don't want to get involved in what's going on around the world, and the Democrats were like, we're really involved. So they're both trying to build up military benefits. I think World War II, US had a small, really small force. The Navy was big. It was, I would argue, second most powerful.
It's really quick. That's quick. That's more like
By the end, we're
it's just a solemn
I need this. Let's buy
军公安部得单独一下，军官都能打兵。美国人不打不惯。
Which is where the tour group went at. came in by way of shipping from California. They're 2,000 miles away, and back then that wasn't very efficient. The purpose of these ships here was to be a quick, swift response to any aggressions detected by the Japanese. We had no idea the Japanese were going to go way as far as the Bering Sea and attack them at home. We thought we were going to have to go run and meet them somewhere out in the ocean because they attacked Cuba, or because they attacked Guam, or because they attacked one of our buddies. Therefore, we had all of these here. All of those
Then another miracle happened. Because of course they had to do it. Make sure that all crew members were on deck and they had water. There was 0 casualties among the Missouri crew. The only injuries were very minor burns, specifically the fire. The only death that day was the pilot himself. As they were cleaning up the wreckage of that wing and fire, they did find the pilot's body. He had also been thrown up onto the deck. And Captain Callahan, the first captain of this ship, ordered some crew members to take that young pilot's body below to the dispensary to be identified and to be ready for burial at sea the next day. If you know anything about the USA, you know that burial at sea means burial at sea with honors. Okay? Now the crew didn't like to say it. They wanted to show the body or to call it a day. Because he was the enemy after all. He had just been trying to kill him, right? But Captain Callahan, being a man of passion and conviction, took this as an opportunity to teach the young crew a lesson in humanity and humility. After all, he told them, even doing this country what we're trying to do for ours, so they did. In fact, that night, 3 crew members sang all night long and singing together. They should
お寿司しようとし、日本も4月から6月にかけて特攻機による体当たり攻撃を繰り返した。チラ、陸軍特別攻撃隊の最前線基地である。チラ、日本の基地を中国や朝鮮半島特攻隊員が集まってきた。その主力は核の兵と少年飛行兵である。チャイニーズの他にわずか17歳の若さである。
December 1991, I was fortunate to be on board the battleship Missouri for her last cruise, and she pulled into Pearl Harbor to celebrate the 50th anniversary. We turned into the entrance channel just as the sun was popping up over Diamond Head in the distance. In my mind's eye, I could see the films of the burning of the battleships and smoke descending to the sky. Off to the port side, I could see the Arizona Memorial. It was truly an emotional moment to be on board the ship when the war ended. A few thousand miles away, and see where the war started.
it's only 130. 125.
Yeah, no privacy, a little curtain for privacy. I'm sure you're usually just exhausted, so you don't even. Yeah. You work all day.
These are all the soldiers.
This is money. Really good.
So every time I see a train, I'm gonna log in on that. They'll listen to it. Como no sé si esperan aquí, ¿no? Like, es que it takes somebody to do this work. It takes somebody to be porque no, y es diferente si quería aire, pues déjalo. Pero si quiere que de emoción para hacer no es a cualquier persona.
engineer for it.
water to your phone?
Money orders.
So do we need someone to help her take it? It's not ours.
Guys, have a seat on the bench. Find these notes. Thank you.
He's dead, he's dead.
Later, he wrote a book, Journey to Victory, and described all the details about Rosamond. He said he was so relieved and impressed by the Martin's speech. He was never before the freedom, justice, and tolerance in his opening remarks, instead of using some language. After this short remark was began, General Navarro was standing there very sad. They are POWs, prisoners of war. Number 2 on the photo is Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright, who captured them on the Philippines. Number 3 on the photo is British Lieutenant General Arthur Percy, who captured them on the Philippines. This man survived the years in justice prison. They were released as 4 days sentenced to death. At that time, both men stood the were over 6 feet tall, but none of them weighed over 1 weight.
rather use the all six signatures. You could use two signatures. One push on the side if you're on the other side. You can use it all. So the first and the second pen, as you see, as he used, just to compound and did these two.
You saw this?
Watch yourself, it says.
No, that was been open until World War II carrier. And so you had the captain's chair right up there. It is sitting there.
Yeah, they give them charge, large and charge. I don't think they'll allow women or men to there right now. Someday we would have a city. Yeah.
Oh, look, wiper control on.
PA amplifiers, so you plug a headset in there and make an announcement.
We do have wipers.
Yes, it is.
Wiper control.
Don't touch anything.
Pretend I'm not here. Yeah, it's like you hook your headset up.
Put them in there.
Yeah, I saw through the hatch.
Welcome in my fellowship.
That's your chair over there.
Yeah. Sometimes the commander, they want to sitting here too.
Yeah.
So you can raise it up.
Yeah, 'cause you don't want those guys to get shot. They're driving, they can't get shot. Charlie.
That's a lot of coax. Tim, are you there? I think they're really.
Yeah, you're looking at two little birds in there, it's kind of cool.
Excuse me?
Oh, you're good.
It's going down.
When everybody's seeing what they won't see. Yeah. Slippery.
want to sit here?
Armor intended to keep lost battleships. There were ships and battles that were lost from the command crew being killed in battleships. They tried to armor them to protect them.
Whoa.
It says do not touch
Captain
any
Scare.
buttons. There's no buttons.
That they'll last longer. Alright. Let's go up.